So what exactly was the environmental crisis? Were just people just being reckless with the environment, or the cutting down the
Yeah,
trees, or
people were cutting down all the trees to burn them even in the city parks to burn them to heat their homes. And there was the Soviets were not very kind to the environment. Let's put it
right?
that way. So Armenia was already in a situation where it didn't have sufficient tree cover, and this just made it worse. So since that time, Armenia Tree Project has planted 8.5 million trees.
Welcome to the Christ and Coffee podcast. My name is Dr. Papelian, and today we're going to talk about all things trees. Yes, you heard that correctly. We're going to talk about the importance of the tree, and we're going to learn about it from the executive director of the Armenia Tree Project, Jeanmarie Papelian. The Armenia Tree Project is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, and they have grown 8 million plus trees in the country of Armenia since the fall of the Soviet Union. And it's led to some remarkable stories, from preserving endangered species to helping people survive a blockade to helping a museum preserve ancient documents. There's so many things connected to trees, and I think we take trees for granted, and we learn about the importance of planting a tree in this conversation. We also talk about the theology of the tree, from the Garden of Eden to the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge, to the tree Calvary, to the tree of life. We cover also the biblical narrative and the symbol of the tree in scriptures, and how the tree is always a symbol of hope, which takes us to the verse of the week found in chapter 14 of the book of Job, verses 7 to 9. I'll be reading from the NIV. At least there is hope for a tree. If it is cut down, it will sprout again, and its new shoots will not fail. Its roots may grow old in the ground, and its stumps die in the soil. Yet at the scent of water it will bud and put forth shoots like a plant. Now, with that said, please grab a cup of coffee and enjoy this Christ-centered conversation. Hey, Jeanmarie, how are you doing? It's so good to have you on the Christ and Coffee podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. It's nice to see you.
I know, it's so good to catch up. I remember you speaking at our church in New York not too long ago, telling us the great work of the Armenia Tree Project, and I'm glad we're having this opportunity now to just kind of talk about it in a greater detail. But before we begin, I have a very vital question to ask you. How do you drink your coffee?
I'm drinking some coffee this afternoon from my favorite mug. I'm going to try to hold it up to the camera. Oh, can you see it? It's an Oregon Ducks mug. It says
Okay.
Duck Mom. It's a little blurry.
All right.
My son is an Oregon Duck. He goes to the University of Oregon. And
Great.
so I bought myself the Oregon Duck Mom mug.
I didn't know Duck Moms were a thing, but that's great. No, that's a wonderful school. Yeah, great sports program too. And yeah, it's wonderful. So how is it being the long distance? You're on the East Coast, he's on the West Coast. Has it been tough, or?
Yeah, well, it's been tougher for his parents than it has been for him.
Of course. Yeah, I remember my mom crying. I was the last of two to leave. And
We did.
I didn't quite get it until I dropped off my kid to preschool for the first time, and I got emotional. I was like, okay, this is the beginning of that process. I can't imagine what the end of that process will be like.
Right. But as you said, Oregon has great sports programs, and their football team did really well this past year. My son plays in the marching band, which travels with the football team. So we had a couple of occasions to go to football games and had a great time. We went to the Fiesta Bowl.
Oh, very cool. What instrument does he play?
Yeah. Plays the trumpet in the marching band.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, I was a trumpet player too. Not on the college level, but yeah, I played jazz trumpet. The highlight of my career was playing with Maynard Ferguson in our high school jazz band, which were pretty good. We were a pretty good high school jazz band. We went around the county and stuff and played some cool venues. But yeah,
wow,
it's not the best instrument as a parent to have their kid play though, because it's so loud.
Yeah, there is that. I guess it could be worse. Could be drums, right?
Yeah, drums is probably up there too. But well, that's amazing. That's amazing that he plays. So let's talk trees. The
Sure.
Armenia Tree Project. What is that? If you would say the elevator pitch, what is the Armenian Tree Project?
So the Armenia Tree Project uses trees to help improve the standard of living of the people in Armenia. And we've been doing that for 30 years. So our aim is to help improve the local environment with an eye to the global environment, preserving indigenous species and helping those with the fewest resources first.
Amazing. So just all this whole encompassing aspect to help make the country a better place through the act of planting trees.
That's right.
So I think we
So
take
Armenia
for
Tree Project was established. Oh, sorry.
yeah, I think we take for granted the power of what one tree could do. But yeah, tell me about the history. How did this start? This is the 30th anniversary. Congratulations. But what was the
Thank
inception of it?
you.
What was
So many of your listeners might remember that Armenia in the early 1990s was in rough shape. There was a terrible earthquake in 1988, followed by the collapse of the Soviet Union, followed by a war and a blockade, which resulted in an energy crisis. And during this energy crisis in the winter, people were cutting down trees in Armenia, even in the city parks, to burn them to heat their homes. And Carolyn Mugar, who is an Armenian American activist from the Boston area, was in Armenia in the early 1990s. And she saw this and she thought, well, if Armenia survives all these other crises, it will have an environmental crisis. And so she started the Armenia Tree Project. And, you know, planting a tree is ultimately an act of hope for the future. And in dark times when people need hope, it's a way to give them hope.
great? So what exactly was the environmental crisis? Were just people just being reckless with the environment, or the cutting down the
Yeah,
trees, or
people were cutting down all the trees to burn them even in the city parks to burn them to heat their homes. And you know, there was the Soviets were not very kind to the environment. Let's put it
right?
that way. So Armenia was already in a situation where it didn't have sufficient tree cover, and this just made it worse. So since that time, Armenia Tree Project has planted 8.5 million trees.
Wow.
Yeah. We've planted them all over the country and in Artsakh when Artsakh was still a thing. And we employed lots of people. We've established more than 1,500 hectares of new forest in Armenia. And we do community tree planting as well. We have about 1,700 sites all over Armenia where we've done community tree planting, which might be in a schoolyard or a churchyard, create a village orchard, that type of thing. We do a lot of distribution of fruit and nut trees to villagers so that they can grow the fruit and nuts in their own backyards. And we employ a lot of people. We're a big employer. So in Armenia, we have about 80 year-round employees. They grow the trees in our nurseries, they maintain our greenhouses, etc. And during the spring and fall planting seasons, we hire up to 300 additional workers to help us plant the trees. And these are typically people from rural villages where there aren't a lot of job opportunities. So they're grateful for when we come around twice a year that they can work with us.
Yeah, that's amazing. No, it's an interesting insight about thinking like the Soviet Union it has an atheistic framework in its infrastructure. You think it might care about the earth because uh, God doesn't exist. This is just what we have. But it's just quite interesting how it was the opposite, how reckless they were, how there was no art. A lot of the Soviet houses were just the cement huts that were just cheap and efficient, but really not long term vision casting or aesthetic. And I think a beautiful tree plants, it takes time for it to cultivate and grow, but you know, like you said, it's this visual of hope, of growth, of the future. So that was quite interesting observation. So you plant 8 million trees. What kind of trees do you specialize in? Is it all types of trees? Is it depending on the
Yeah, so we
region?
grow Yeah, we grow more than 60 varieties of trees in our nurseries. And we grow trees that are native to the region or have been acclimated. There are a couple of examples of trees that were introduced during the Russian Empire, for example, and they become acclimated in Armenia, and they're not invasive. But we focus on local trees, native trees, which we propagate and grow in our nurseries. What we plant depends on the region where we're planting it and the type of soil and so forth. So we have experts who, when we're going to plant an area, will examine the soil. We often consult with the experts at the Botanical Garden in Yerevan to make sure that we're planting what's best for that particular area, to make sure that it has a high survival rate. And we do, over the last 30 years, have a very high survival rate of both our forestry plantings and our community tree plantings.
Amazing, amazing. What are some unique trees native to Armenia? And what are some of the newer trees that were introduced that are actually been successful? So what are some of the top 5 trees of planting in Armenia? I'd be curious.
So because you and I are both of Armenian descent, that Armenians love fruit trees.
And the fruit is amazing there, by the way. For those who have never tasted the food there, it's quite amazing.
And the fruit is amazing. So we grow peaches, pears, plums, apples, cherries, quince, walnuts, almonds. Those are some of the fruit and nut trees that we grow, which are very popular, especially when we're distributing fruit trees to households in the villages, so that people can grow their own and consume them. When we do forestry planting, the vast majority of trees in Armenian forests are pine trees. And there are a number of varieties of trees, but that's the vast majority. But you don't want to have a monoculture planting, which is what we saw during Soviet times, that they would just do these, you can't even call it a forest, like a plantation of pine trees, for example, with no biodiversity. It's not a real forest. It won't support the type of biodiversity. It's contrary to Armenia's unique genetic heritage, right? I mean, our forests and wildlife and mushrooms and you name it interact with each other to create this unique biodiversity, and you sort of destroy that when you're just planting, especially if you're planting imported trees. So we make sure that there's a mix of species when we're planting a forest. So there might be, the majority might be pine trees, but we'll plant, depending on the location, other types of trees, perhaps maple, ash, beech, and always in a forest about 30% of wild fruit trees, because that's important for biodiversity, and the animals need something to eat as well.
Wow. What are some unique trees or animals that are just Armenia biodiversity specific that like a typical, I don't know much about this, so it surprised me with some fun facts.
Okay, well, here's a fun fact, and I like to tell this story because it's a great conservation success story. There is an animal which is called the Caucasian leopard, sometimes also known as a Persian leopard. And this animal has been written about in forests in Armenia for thousands of years, right? And about 25 years ago, the Caucasian leopard disappeared and wasn't seen in Armenia anymore. It had gone other places to find something to eat. So that was a loss. Now, around that time, some scientists had started working in the Khosrov Nature Preserve to restore the population of wild goats,
okay,
which are native to Armenia. And when the population of wild goats was restored, guess what happened? The leopard came back. And so the first Caucasian leopard was seen in 2018. Armenia declared 2019 the year of the leopard, and he was on a postage stamp and all these other things. And now they think there are probably about between 20 and 25 leopards in Armenia. And if you follow the WWF Armenia or the Caucasus Nature Fund, they have some trap cameras in the Khosrov Nature Preserve. And once in a while, the leopard will walk by and they'll post the video on social media. And I love to see that. So it's a conservation success story. And this is what I was trying to explain earlier about how everything in the forest is interconnected. Now, the reason that that nature preserve is called the Khosrov Nature Preserve is because there was a king of Armenia more than 1,000 years ago whose name was Khosrov, and he planted forests. And some of those forests still exist and are part of this nature preserve. One of the reasons King Khosrov liked to plant forests is because he enjoyed hunting. And so he knew that if you planted a forest, then you would create the habitat for these animals to live in. But we all rely on the interconnectivity of the forest. A lot of people in Armenia, as you know, if they live near a forest, they will hunt for mushrooms and ground nuts and herbs. And we all love to eat the zhengalov hats that comes from Artsakh. And what are the 27 herbs that went into zhengalov hats? They were what was local that people would forage, right? And we all rely on that. And there's something that's lost when you cut down a forest and then you replace it with just one species of tree, especially if they're not native.
Wow. I mean, you mentioned the dish of Artsakh. For those who don't know, Artsakh was taken from Armenians recently through a barbaric act. And even during the warfare, Azeris destroyed a lot of trees, and it's tragic. We're a very small country. We've always lost lands, and here are some more indigenous lands taken from us in the 21st century. How has the recent exodus of Armenians from Artsakh affected the Armenia Tree Project? What has been lost?
Well, we had about 40 community tree planting sites in Artsakh before 2020. Things like I mentioned before, schoolyards, churchyards, those types of things. Artsakh didn't need a lot of forests. It had beautiful forests. It was a forested mountainous area. During the 2020 war, the Azeris attacked the forests of Artsakh using white phosphorus, which destroys every living thing. And it was a terrible tragedy. After the war ended in 2020 and before the forced exodus or displacement in the fall of 2023, we at Armenia Tree Project wanted to help. And this was it ended up being a great project. We thought, with our skill set, what can we do, right? And we had heard that a lot of the farmers in villages in Artsakh had lost agricultural land as a result of the terms of the ceasefire. And there was a concern about possible food insecurity. So we know greenhouses. And so we went into Artsakh and we built 51 greenhouses in the spring of 2022. Yes, the spring of 2022. 49 of them were in the backyards of villagers in Martuni and Askaran, and 2 were at schools, with the idea that they would be local training centers. And we paired with this great local NGO in Armenia called Green Lane NGO, which works with farmers to teach them how to grow high-value herbs and vegetables and to market and package them for sale. So we gave them soil and we gave them seeds and we gave them instruction and hand tools, and we gave them these small backyard greenhouses, which the idea being that you could grow vegetables more intensively and that you could extend the growing season. So in the summer of 2022, I got all these great pictures about these wonderful vegetables people were having in their greenhouses, and the same in the fall of 2022. And then in December of 2022, our team went to Artsakh and distributed small space heaters for people to use in the greenhouses. And then 2 days after our team returned, the blockade was imposed. And the blockade ended with the forced exodus of 120,000 people out of Artsakh. We were concerned about the beneficiaries of these greenhouses. They were very grateful for the help that we gave them in the form of the greenhouses. They had those winter vegetables and herbs. And then it became spring planting season and the blockade was still going on. We managed to get seeds in through the blockade. Seeds don't take up much space. So we did manage to get thousands of seeds in through the blockade. We gave them to those 49 families, plus about another 100 or so small farmers, so they could do some spring planting. And then we also worked with two other NGOs. One is the Armenian Missionary Association of America, and the other is the Tufenkian Foundation, to import 90 tons of seed potatoes at the beginning of April of 2023 into Artsakh and to distribute them to small farmers. I was in Armenia at the beginning of October last fall, within days of when the exodus had happened, and I found some of the people who had been our greenhouse beneficiaries and talked to them, trying to find out what did they need and how could we help. And this woman said to me, if it wasn't for those potatoes, we would have died from hunger.
Wow. That's an amazing testament to literally saving people's lives through the act of planting God's creation, right? And stewarding it correctly. And God forbid,
Right.
something would continue to Armenia proper if there's enough self-sustainability. That people could still eat. A blockade is not going to prevent people to starvation. That's an amazing. It's like a beautiful story in the midst of a great tragedy, and it's beautiful to always focus on the people focusing on doing the good in the midst of great evil and continued persecution of our people. And it's always important to remember the people who are just doing those little things, that one little tiny smuggling of seeds through a blockade region could save an entire family. So that's amazing, amazing work. What are some other cool stories of the Armenian Tree Project that have been success stories for the past 30 years that you could share? Because these are super exciting. And I think as you're telling the stories, you see this is more than just planting trees here. This is
right. It's more than just planting trees. We're helping people gain economic independence. We have this program within our community tree planting program, which is called Backyard Nursery. And what we do is we give seeds to a family, and they plant those seeds in their backyard. And we support them. We give them training and advice. When the seedlings are ready to be planted in one of our forests or other sites, we purchase them from that family. So they're able to stay in their rural village and have some income by using their land to grow trees for us. And this is important because if you're familiar with Armenia, a lot of people leave the villages, if not seasonally, then permanently, to go find jobs in Russia, in Dubai. And so if there are people left in the village, they tend to be women. And these women are hard workers and they're great. And I remember a few years ago, there was a lady, she's since passed on, but she had worked with us in this program for years. And she was quite elderly. And she said to me, my kids want me to leave the village and go live with them in Moscow, but I want to stay here. This is my home. And it was because she was growing these trees for us and selling them to us that she was able to stay in her village. I have another great story, which is we were visiting one of the villages where we have a lot of families participating in this program. It's a village called Ahavnavank, because there was a monastery at the top of the village called Ahavnavank. And there's a woman who has been working with us for a long time, and we were going to visit her. And my colleague from Armenia Tree Project, who manages the program, said, "You're going to have to meet this woman's neighbor." So we go to meet them, and it's this little boy, and his name is David. And he used to follow my colleague around the village and say to him, "Mr. Seroj, when are you going to give me some seeds? I want to grow trees for you." And so eventually, Mr. Seroj went and met the family, and he had to sign the contract with the dad. The little boy couldn't do it. But this kid is helping his dad grow trees and earn income by growing trees and selling them to us. And he was so proud to show me all the work that he does and how the apple trees are his favorite and so on and so forth. So lots of hope, again, hope for the future, right? In these little villages where there isn't much economic opportunity.
Yeah, there's this interesting verse, I think, in the book of Job where it's like, it describes a bleakful situation. I have hope like a cut down tree. The indication of like that correlation with trees and hope. But yeah, there's a lot of theology around the trees and the scriptures. I mean, the whole narrative of the Bible could be explained through.
Well, there is,
trees.
And from time to time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, as you know, I go to visit a lot of churches, and I talk to Sunday schools about the Armenia Tree Project, and I always mention that um, trees come up very early on in the book of Genesis.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
right there in chapter 1. And they mention that God creates trees on the second day. And then he says to Adam, I've given you every tree yielding fruit whose seed was in itself, and to you this shall be for meat. So he tells Adam, I've created these trees so you'll have something to eat. He also tells Adam that you're responsible for taking care of the earth, which is a gift from
yeah.
God. And I think maybe we haven't done such a great job of that. We could do better. And it seems to me that these days there's a better public consciousness about taking care of the earth, cleaning the seas, taking care of trees. We're starting to understand that we will all benefit from doing better. But
Right.
trees are miraculous. They don't just give us fruit and nuts. They clean the air. Their
Yeah.
root systems clean the water. They help reduce dust, prevent erosion, create shade, so cool the earth, create habitats for animals, like we already said. If you harvest trees sustainably, you can um, make all sorts of things out of them. Actually, a great project that ATP is about to embark on, and I bet you would never think of this one. In Armenia, there is a museum called the Matanadaran. And in the Matanadaran, there are thousands of beautiful, ancient, illuminated manuscripts. Um,
Some of the world's
if you
oldest
ever get to
Bibles are
Armenia,
at this museum. Yeah.
right? And these spectacular illuminated manuscripts. And they restore these manuscripts. They have a whole scientific wing with laboratories where they restore these manuscripts very painstakingly. And they use paper that historically has been imported from Japan. It's made from Japanese mulberry trees.
Okay.
So the scientists at the Matanadaran did an experiment of growing native mulberry trees from Armenia and trying to make the paper. And they discovered that they could make the paper. So now Armenia Tree Project is going to work with Matanadaran to grow mulberry trees from which they can make the paper that is used to restore the manuscripts. And the great thing about this is you don't have to cut down the trees. The paper is made from pruning young branches.
Wow. Again, another fascinating insight that I had no idea would emerge from planting a tree. I
Right? For
think,
planting a tree.
yeah, I'm coming from New York City, so it's like very, even moving out west here, there's more trees in the sense of maybe not like the fall season. That's the one thing I really miss moving out west, the fall season. But a lot of people, especially the Armenians in Southern California, everyone tends to have like a fruit tree of some sort. It's just interesting. It's part of the DNA. Like it's like, all right, it's my season. I'm gonna go bring the fruit I have in my house to my friends as a guest, and it's just an interesting, like free gift bartering sort of thing that is emerging. But it's always been the case historically. But I think so often as we're getting more digital, as we're getting more urban, we lose sight of the vitality of literally this thing that we're planting gives us the air we breathe, gives us the food we eat, gives us the
Right?
shade and the fuel we need. It's quite remarkable, and I think like you said, there has been this big turn in appreciating nature, especially since the Industrial Revolution. What is also fascinating too is usually when we talk about this topic, it usually like tends to get politicized unnecessarily about like your thoughts on global warming, how it's accelerating this and that. But if you're just describing like practical, tangible things like, do you want a clean environment? Are you pro environment? Like versus the big picture, everyone should be on the same page with that. Everyone should be pro environment in some capacity. And like you said, with the mandate that God gave the first humans is take care of this creation I made. Like it's a good thing. Just you're responsible. Take care of it. You have the responsibility to destroy it or to sustain it. I'm with you in this. And sadly, like you said, sometimes we lose sight of that very simple fact that humanity has a special role to play in being the image of God and cultivating the garden And this is before the fall, and that also has a lot of theological implications. This is what we're supposed to do, and even in the perfect world, we're supposed to be doing this.
So, Armenia Tree Project is not a political organization. We're not associated with any political organization or with any particular religious organization. And I know in America, in North America, the issue of climate change has become politicized. But, I don't need to debate with anybody what's causing it. We just know that it's happening. And we've built our whole civilization around the climate being a certain way. And if it's going to change, then it's going to cause problems for us. So there are some things that we know we can do to slow down the pace of the change. And, that's really what we need to do. It doesn't need to be political. I don't need to argue with you about what's causing it. The scientists can tell you what they think is causing it.
Yeah, I mean, like, we shouldn't be politicizing, like, let's get seeds to people blockaded, like we're trying to feed people with growing trees. Like, it's interesting, but that's great that there can be these causes like the Armenia Tree Project where it doesn't have to be, divisive or political. It's just, we're literally helping people. We're being stewards of the creation, and Armenia is quite beautiful for those who haven't visited. It's one of the few places where it's a small country. It's about the size of Maryland, but you could go to the mountains, you could go to the forest, you could go to the lake, all driving distance. And what's the biodiversity within Armenia? Because I would love, kind of like what they do with New Zealand with the movie sets. They could have a movie set there and they could get different environments. I feel like you could do that in Armenia.
You totally could do that. You totally could do that in Armenia. Sorry to cut you off.
Go for it.
Yeah. So Armenia actually is part of what's known as the Caucasus Biodiversity Hotspot. So it's a biodiversity hotspot, and the tiny country of Armenia itself has 11 different microclimates.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've noticed this. I go to Armenia all the time. In the past 10 years or so, starting in the 90s when Armenia became independent, we used to go to Armenia. We used to just see each other, right? Armenians coming from different parts of the world. In the past, I don't know, 15 years or so, you've seen tourists come from other places. But in the past 10 years or so, there have been a lot of people coming from India. And it turns out there is some sort of Indian pop star who came to Armenia and filmed some of his music videos there in some beautiful places in Armenia. And so tourists started to come to look for these places. And then they discovered how great Armenia is. And so now when you go to Armenia, you see lots of Indian tourists. There's lots of other people too. I mean, I've seen people come from Germany for hiking and backpacking and bird watching. And some people I ran into one time who were on a trip from England for an early Christian history tour. We've got it all. The food's good.
I've encountered an Indian Bollywood actress in Armenia last time I was there. I was there with my wife and my brother on a rooftop bar, and there was a group of Indians. We started talking, and she's like this super famous Bollywood actress. And I told her I'm a pastor, and she goes, I never had a drink with a pastor before. And I was like, I never had a drink with a Bollywood actress before. And we just cheered. It was like a very funny moment. But yeah, it's amazing, the Indian connection. Also, there's a lot of Indian medical students as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And we love it. Everybody should come and discover how wonderful Armenia is, right?
I think being a tourist location is the kind of next big thing. Especially those who like nature, just preserving that and going on backpacking trips. That'd be remarkable. Like you said, 11 different, did you say 11 different? This is going to be like my new fun Armenian fact. I'm going to tell my friends, like, we're the first Christian nation and we have 11 different
microclimates. 11 different microclimates.
Okay.
Yeah. And I also want to point out that even before Armenia became Christian, so if we have this, say, 4,000 year history as a culture, 2,000 years of it was pagan culture. And in the pagan culture, there was a lot of imagery around and reverence for trees. This tree of life imagery, these stories of there were ancient kings who were dedicated to this cult of the plane trees known as Sosi in Armenian, real deep reverence for trees. And we continue to use this imagery in the modern Armenian church of the tree of life. And if you visit some of the older churches in Armenia, you will see the carvings or on all the khachkars, the stone crosses of the tree of life image. And it goes back to very ancient times where I think people were possibly more connected to the land and understood that the trees actually do give life.
No, but going back to Genesis, it's in the Bible, the tree of life and the tree of the forbidden knowledge of good and evil.
Right.
And for me, that forbidden fruit is the taking on the role of God and deciding what's right and wrong. And in that process, humanity thinks they're acting like God and they're not being obedient to God. And in that, you have a lot of destruction, not cultivation. And then the Hachgar imagery, I think we're the one of the few traditions that actually have some angelic and earthly images into the cross, which is beautiful because you can make a case that the cursed tree on the cross is the tree of life because through the death of Christ, there's a reversal of the curse. Jesus cursed the fig tree. I think one interpretation is the fig leaves that Adam and Eve ran from. It could be from the tree of destruction. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He's cursing that. He curses the one who is hung on the tree, as the scriptures say. The cross is a tree. And through that death on that tree, Jesus kind of ushers in a new creation. And that's the theology. It's a redemption of creation. It's from death to life now. And then in the life to come, we're going to be eating from the tree of life again with God in a new earth, new heaven. And this is important because I think some Christian theologies that are faulty think that we're going to escape the earth. But really what God's plan is a new earth, a new heaven. And it's going to be a beautiful fulfillment of all things. But pivoting it narratively, it's from tree of life, the forbidden tree, the cross, and then tree of life that we're partaking with God face to face. So it carries a whole narrative of scripture, these trees.
And Armenia figures so prominently in these tales, right? Some ancient scholars placed the Garden of Eden in Armenia. Noah landed his ark on Mount Ararat, which is in Armenia. And to us, in the West, it's just a story. To people who live in that part of the world, it's very real. Armenians have a very specific legend about which grandson of Noah they're descended from. They have this legend about, there's this story about Noah growing grapes and making wine and getting drunk. And then the world's oldest wine was found not far from Mount Ararat, that they've been making wine there for 6,000 years, right? And so these stories are all there. Armenia is a beautiful place. The world is a beautiful place. The natural world is a beautiful place. And when you say, we're going to go someplace different or someplace better, what you called faulty theology, why wouldn't we enjoy this beautiful world that we have and try to preserve it like God told Adam to do?
Yeah. How does the Armenia Tree Project get funded? How does the people just give you trees to plant, or how does it work?
Well, we grow our own trees in our own nurseries. So most of our funding comes from individual donors, and most of them are in North America. We do apply for and receive grants from time to time. We just finished up a big project that we worked on for 2 years with the European Union to do some greening in the Chirac region and to create economic opportunities by adding another 100 or so backyard nurseries in villages in the Chirac region of Armenia. And we're going to be embarking on a couple more projects like that with some big organizations that are interested in development in Armenia over the next couple of years. But yeah, most of our funding comes from individuals in North America. And a program that we have is that you can sponsor a tree. So let's say, for example, it's your birthday and you have everything you need. You don't need anybody to buy you something, but I want to remember your birthday and give a gift. And so you can make a donation to Tree Project to sponsor a tree, symbolically sponsor a tree being planted in Armenia in honor of Haig's birthday. And then we would send you a nice certificate that says, in honor of your birthday, Jeanmarie has planted a tree in Armenia. So
amazing. And
that's a really nice
all on the website, Armenia Tree Project.
All on the website. Yeah, it's all on the website. We just launched our updated website for the 30th anniversary, and I think it looks pretty good.
What is the 35th anniversary look like? What are some goals, your big goals that you're building towards?
So over the past 8 or 9 years since I came to Armenia Tree Project, I've been focused with the team on increasing our efficiency and productivity. So we've gone from planting about 200,000 trees a year to this year we're going to plant 800,000 trees. We anticipate that in 2025 we'll plant 1 million trees. And so my goals between now and the 35th is to be able to maintain, between 800,000 and 1 million trees a year. It's a big operation, but we've worked really hard to improve our efficiency, our productivity. We've invested in some infrastructure that supports that, some high-tech greenhouses, for example, some seed testing equipment. One of the other things that we want to develop by the 35th anniversary is our own sort of seed bank. So if we're planting at this level, then we need to have a reliable source of healthy seeds, local seeds. Because as I said before, if you're importing something, then you're not preserving the unique genetic history of Armenia's forest. And so we want to be able to collect seeds and preserve them so that if there's a bad year and we can't collect enough seeds that year, we have some in storage. So right now we're doing some research about what we need. We're going to need some equipment and some storage and refrigeration and some fancy equipment and all these things. So that's something we're hoping to establish by the time of the 35th. Armenia has a small national seed bank at the Yerevan Botanical Garden, but it's not what we're looking to do, right? It's for a different purpose. And so Armenia Tree Project is hoping to lead the way by example in how to identify healthy seeds, collect them, and store them for future use so that we can maintain this level of planting. I should mention that in 2015, Armenia, the government of Armenia, committed under the Paris Accords to double its forest cover by the year 2050. Depending on who you ask, Armenia has at present somewhere between 11 and 13% forest cover. So to get it to 20% would require planting another something like 250,000 hectares of forest, or about 800 million trees. Now, Armenia Tree Project is not going to do that. We're too small. But we are the leader, and we are leading by example in planting healthy trees, in bringing in new technology and new approaches, and we want to continue to do that.
Amazing work. I'm excited to see how accelerated this could get, and that's amazing. You're just putting the foot on the pedal with just like, all right, let's pump it up, let's get more trees, and then creating that archive of seeds is amazing work. And I'm excited to see the next 5 years of the Armenian Tree Project, because I know a lot of people who work for the company that seem to speak highly, and it's also, like you said, it affects all aspects of employment, to animals, to just giving food to someone, to creating a self-sustainable country. And it's amazing how just the act of planting and does wonders, and it gives that futuristic hope that this is our land. We're gonna watch this tree grow. This tree's gonna outlive me. Let's plant it, and it's quite beautiful. Last question: if you have one message to share with the church in America, what would it be?
I guess my message would be along the lines of what I already said, which is God told us to take care of the earth, and it is our responsibility to do that.
Jeanmarie, thank you so much for your time and for the work that you're doing. Thank you so much. I would love for those who are listening, if you want to buy a tree, support the cause, visit what they do on the grounds, visit Armenia. All this stuff will help this mission and this time of the future of Armenia. I want to thank all of you for tuning in to the end of this podcast. Have a great week. I'll provide some links below for you to connect more with the Armenia Tree Project. Have a great week. God bless you, and see you next week on the Christ and Coffee podcast. God bless you. Take care.